You're listening to the Divorce and Your Money Show, the number one podcast that discusses the complex business of divorce. I'm your host, Sean Lehman, MBA and certified divorce financial analyst. And in this episode, we have a great guest. Almost every one of you, when I get to work with you or talk with you, has a suspicion that your spouse might be hiding money from you. And sometimes that amount can be large. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars or more. And hiding assets doesn't necessarily just mean money in a bank account. It could be a home you don't know about. It could be cars you don't know about. It could be a business that you don't know about. And you want those assets, and you want to know about those assets because you're oftentimes entitled to benefiting from that money. And so my guest today is named Philip Segal, and he's been on all sorts of national television shows. He is an expert at finding hidden assets, and he's going to tell us some of the ways that you can find out if your spouse is hiding money from you and some things that you might not know about. And we'll give you an illustration of just how complicated this process is and why you might want to consider hiring someone like Philip if you suspect that there are hidden assets. And it's interesting because he's even worked in cases where you've been married for 30 years, you lived in the same state, and believe it or not, there could be a home somewhere in a different state or a business somewhere that might lead to some other assets that you did not know about, even when you thought that things were pretty straightforward in your marriage. So this is a great episode, and we'll give you a lot of food for thought when you listen to this interview. So without further ado, here's my interview with Philip Segal. Today on the show with me, I have Philip Segal. He is the founder of Charles Griffin Intelligence and also author of the book, The Art of Fact Investigation, Creative Thinking in the Age of Information Overload. Philip, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Why don't you give us an introduction and tell us about your background and also specifically what you do in divorce cases?
My background is that of a journalist. I was a financial journalist primarily for 19 years, lastly, the finance editor of the Wall Street Journal in Asia. And then in midlife, I became a lawyer, and I now do fact-finding work, sometimes for other lawyers, sometimes for companies or just individuals. And it's a great mixture of the kind of digging that journalists are trained to do with the legal work that you learn to do in law school. And the kinds of work that we do in divorce cases primarily comes down to asset searching. If you're getting divorced and the other side says, well, I don't have any money, this is how much I can give you, we better settle on this. And if you think, no, that he is usually a woman thinking he has a lot more money than he admits to having, I don't want to settle, I want to make sure he's got what I think he's got, then they might call us, and because we do asset searches, we do investigations of all kinds, but in divorce cases, we'll do asset searches, and we'll try and figure out how much money the person is hiding. Or sometimes after divorce, when somebody fails to pay support, fails to pay alimony, we'll go around and figure out how much they've got, if there are any assets that we can go seize for failure to pay. So that's the kind of thing we do for family law.
Got it. That makes sense. And so, I hear all the time, almost every day, from someone that they think their spouse is hiding some money from them, and potentially in large sums. But of course, the challenge is it's hidden. So if someone gives you a call and they say, I think my spouse is hiding money, I'm getting divorced, or I'm in the divorce process, how do you start looking for those types of assets?
You have to take a completely fresh look at the person, because we always say that our clients know more than they think they know about their spouses or their ex-spouse's finances, because no one will know more than the wife the kinds of names he might give a company, the kinds of hang-ups he might have, the kinds of places that he's attached to where he might have wanted to go buy property, or maybe the street he grew up on, and that's what he'll name his company after. Those are really good bits of information to get. But on the other hand, people who keep their financial affairs completely secret from their spouse for 5, 10, 20 years, really don't give that spouse a whole lot of information on which to go. So we always like to take a fresh look at every person that we investigate. So that if the wife says, well, I'm sure you're not going to find anything outside of Georgia. We've both lived in Atlanta all our lives. We don't travel very much. Don't look outside of Georgia. We like to look outside of Georgia. Maybe not on site, but we'll take database looks to see, because frequently husbands end up surprising wives, and there'll be a condo in Miami the wife never knew about. I once had a husband who had bought a $3 million mansion, and unbeknownst to his wife, and he had left the papers lying around, stupidly for him, but we discovered that he had a company that he had formed, and we looked and saw what that company owned. It owned a mansion. So you have to really try not to assume that you know too much before you begin.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, I know some people listening will say, and maybe even some attorneys might say, well, that's what the discovery process is for, is, I'll just subpoena the records, and from there I'll have all the information. Why? You have a great section in your book, actually, as to why that might not be the case. So why doesn't just the traditional kind of legal process that almost every family law attorney or every family law is trained in, why doesn't that work in this situation?
The discovery process doesn't always work because it's predicated on the idea that people will tell the truth. And if they say to you, I want you to tell me every bank account that you've got, and you don't hand over evidence of every bank account you've got, it's up to the wife's attorney to subpoena the banks that they haven't told us about. The other side is not going to hand over information that you don't specifically ask for. And you can't just say, I want everything. You have to say, I want the accounts in this bank, or I want the accounts in that bank. You can say, I want everything, but you won't always get it. And so when people sometimes hide assets, they'll do it through a side company. And if you don't know to ask for the records of Alpha LLC, which is the ex-husband's big company through which he owns his Las Vegas property, then they're not going to hand you the documents relating to Alpha LLC. And you won't know to ask about Alpha LLC until you do some investigation. So that's why discovery, of course, is indispensable, but you need extra help to tell you about the things to ask for that they're not going to help you with on the other side.
All right, that makes sense. But, we also live in the age, I want to challenge you a little bit, and we live in the age of Google, and Google knows everything. At least it seems to. Why can't I just, Google search for Alpha LLC, Google search my spouse's name, and get the information that way?
Well, for one thing, I always tell people, Google yourself and see what percentage of yourself and all of your personal financial affairs come up in a Google search. If you Google yourself, will your bank account information be up there? Will every house you ever owned be up there? Will every person you've ever worked with be up there? If you have a bunch of different companies, will all those be up there? In almost no case will there be more than 3 or 4% of everything you know about yourself on a Google search. So if a Google search on you is not very helpful, why would it be that much more helpful on anybody else? Even the most famous people, you're not going to know that much using a Google search. And there are a few reasons for that. Number one, Google's only been around since 1998, so any records that relate to anything before 1998, Google wasn't even there, so Google's playing catch-up. Number two, most legal documents in the United States are not scanned and available on the internet. You have to go to courthouses to find them. So if they're not on the internet, Google can't show them to you. But most importantly, for an asset searcher anyway, if anybody's got any kind of cleverness around how he's going to hide assets, he's not going to attach his name to a secret company that he uses in order to hide assets. If he's trying to hide the assets, he won't do that. You'll have to find the company a different way, maybe in association with an address that is associated with him, or maybe in association with a lawyer who he's used to set up lots of his other companies. And Google is not going to make those leaps for you. Google is a very good starting point, but it's not going to do the thinking for you. It's not going to connect all the dots for you. And when you see 4,000 pages of Google results, you actually start clicking, and after about 10 pages, it stops. You really don't get very much. So if Google did it all, no one would ever need to hire us, and they do. So I guess Google doesn't do it all. But as I say, Google yourself. If it doesn't work for you, why should it work for anybody else?
I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, speaking of Googling myself, one of the first results that'll pop up, or I should say first advertisements that will pop up if I type in my name or your name, it'll be some sort of people search database. It'll say, look and find out if Sean Lehman's a criminal, or Philip Segal is, if he's cheating, or, some sort of crazy attention-grabbing ad that will lead you to a people search database, and we'll see if, at least they claim to find out if you have a criminal record or something like that. Are those useful tools, and do they have limitations? Should we be looking at those kind of things?
I don't use them. Even if someone's paying us, we use databases that are more expensive than that. I'll just give you one example. To do a proper criminal search in the state of New York, it costs $68. You put in the person's name and the person's date of birth, and you'll get a thorough criminal record search in all counties in New York State. That's $68. How is it possible to spend $39.95 and get a nationwide criminal check? It's not possible. Those databases that are that cheap are cheap for a reason, because they're largely garbage. And I now and again, just to make sure I'm not talking out of my hat, I will pay the $2 or $3 and try and see who has the cell phone that I have. It'll say sometimes, put in any cell phone number and you can figure out whose cell phone this is. I'll put in my own cell phone number, and it will tell me that a dentist in Rochester, New York has that cell phone, which is not true because I have it. So and I do that now and again just to make sure that things haven't changed under my feet. And as far as I know, they haven't. You just don't get the kind of value that these people promise. Sometimes they can give you some correct information, but what they will not be is exhaustive. And they're so error prone that I don't even use them. No matter what kind of budget I have in a search, I won't even bother with them.
All right, got it. So the short version is, it sounds like if I'm suspicious, I'm going to have a hard time doing this myself using what I'll just call the most common methods that I see kind of bandied about.
Yeah, I think that's true. Although even if I gave you all the databases that I use with their passwords, you might still have trouble doing this at the beginning, because there's a methodology to it. And there are tricks that we play on ourselves that tend to stop the investigation before it should really continue. People sometimes think that, well, I'll put all this stuff into an expensive database and out will pop the answer. Kind of like on the old Star Trek, when they could ask the computer anything and the computer would just give them the answer. And even these expensive databases don't really do the job for you. They will give you little hints, little clues, but then it's up to you to make sure the databases are correct, because they're error prone, even the good ones. You have to back up on the public record what you see on the database. The database says that Robert Smith owns a condo in Florida, even though he's always supposed to have been a Georgia guy, and there's a Robert Smith in Fort Lauderdale with a condo, and you're all happy. You think, great, that we've got an asset. You have to make sure on the public record that that's the same Robert Smith that you're investigating, or is it a different Robert Smith? You have to find a middle initial. You have to find a signature. You can't trust these databases that they will sort through all the Robert Smiths and tell you that this is the one you're looking at. So they're a starting point, but you really need to be accustomed to putting in hours and hours of painstaking work to make sure that what the databases are showing you is accurate, and also how to go through dozens or hundreds of court cases and newspaper articles and licenses and all the other records that you have to go through in order to find the little clues that will lead you to a residence, to a connection, and you hope to an asset.
So it sounds like from what you're saying is that even if you have all of the tools of the trade, that only gets you so far. And there's a lot of work in regards to the method and even knowing what to look for and how to interpret the information that you might receive that would actually lead you down the line of finding something that's potentially hidden.
Yeah, there's an art to fact investigation. It's partly a craft, but it's partly an art. If a master carpenter handed you his toolbox, would you be able to build a beautiful house with those tools in that toolbox? If he said, "Here are my tools, and here's all the lumber, and here's the metal, and here's the wiring for the electrics, go build a house," you wouldn't know how to do it. You probably wouldn't. I wouldn't, because it takes a long time to practice, to know how to use the tools, which one is appropriate here, which one is appropriate there. It's the same thing as being a lawyer or being an accountant. You can't just have a manual and then say, all right, now I'm going to go do it. There are fine points to doing it, and every case is different. So it's certainly helpful if you know what the tools are. And some people are better at it than others because you need a kind of curiosity, you need a kind of patience, open-mindedness, so that you don't close the investigation too quickly. You have to be able to go down a couple of different paths at the same time because you don't know which one is going to be the most fruitful. Keep them in mind, or keep a system written down as to which ones you've looked at. Abandon the bad ones, go further on the good ones, and hope that you get somewhere. You can't look at every factor in the world. There are too many. There are billions. So you have to take educated guesses. And all of that comes with practice.
I think that makes plenty of sense. You know, we forgot to define something at the very beginning of the interview, so I want to talk about it now. Now, when you say asset search, and when we discuss asset searches and hidden money or hidden assets, it's more than just someone has a bank account somewhere, right?
Correct. Bank accounts are about the hardest thing to go find without a court order, because in the United States, it's illegal. If you hire me to say, I go find my ex-wife's bank accounts, there are people out there who will go and find out what the bank account is that your wife might have. But they'll do it in a way that is illegal under federal law. You can't find out what's in the bank account of a person who has an account that is not your account if that person doesn't give permission, or if a judge doesn't issue a court order to the bank to reveal that information to you. So people always want the easy get me cash, because when you think about assets, you think about a balance sheet. Cash is the easiest thing to get if you know where it is. The problem is you don't know where it is, and even if you do know where it is, you need a court order to go see how much is in there. If I know he always banked at Chase Manhattan, J.P. Morgan Chase, and I know the branch where his account was, I still can't walk in there and get the balance information. Furthermore, he might have emptied the account out. And so what we try to do is look for things that will lead to cash, as well as the things themselves that might be valuable. It's much easier to find a condo or a home or an RV or a nice car that someone owns, and then to see, well, where did the loan come from? If they finance that thing, chances are they bank at the bank where the financing came from. So then you have the condo, which you can send the sheriff over to grab once you have a judgment. But also you have a clue as to where the banking happens. Similarly, if somebody went bankrupt 8 years ago, bankruptcy records are great, and they can sometimes show you where the person had his bank accounts. And if he's from a small town, there are not that many banks in some towns. Chances are he might still have an account there. So that's the kind of thing that you try and get at. You try and get at the easier things that will give you a hint as to where the cash is. Once you have a court order, you can then issue subpoenas, but there's still a trick to finding out where the person banks. And so even if you have a court order, you may still need to look at the hard assets to get a clue as to where to subpoena, because you can't subpoena every bank.
So this is really complicated, is what I'm getting at from the outside. And so let's say, all right, I get it. I get the message that there's a lot of different potential moving pieces if someone is hiding assets from you or attempting to hide assets. What's the process if someone gives you a call? How do you get started?
Well, we take the name of the person we're looking at so that make sure that there's no conflict and that person isn't our client in this or another matter. But then what we do is we have a questionnaire that we like to give people. It's 4 or 5 pages, and it asks a lot of questions about the person we're going to be looking at. Because as I said at the beginning, The spouse often has information, names of pets, every phone number the person ever had, every cell phone number, every office number, all the different addresses that maybe the ones that he hasn't had for 5 years, but maybe there's a record from 5 years ago of a company that was formed at that address, at this old cell phone number. And so every old email address, everything you can remember about the person we want to look for. And when it's a marriage situation, there's a lot more information than if it's I want to sue someone who didn't pay his bill. So we get all that information, and we do a quick look on the databases, and then we say, this is how much we will charge you for a preliminary asset search, which will look at every public record we can get our hands on, every database, newspapers, social media, licensing, securities records, everything that's out there that you can grab without having to talk to anybody. That's what we will do first. And on the simplest cases, this can run under $2,000. More complex ones run more. If someone has 80 buildings and they're all partially financed, that takes a long time to sort through and see how much equity there is in each building. But if someone had a 4-chain dry cleaner or 2 car dealerships in a town and didn't seem to go very far, then it's going to be more affordable. But you still have to look and make sure that they didn't surprise you with anything that you had no idea they had, such as a company in Nevada across the country, which owns a property in California or something else. So that's how it gets started. And then once the budget is approved, we get going. And we like to, we're very proud of the idea that we don't go over the budget that we promise. We do it in writing. And if it's a budget that you can afford, you know that we will get you that memorandum without going over that budget. You won't have to pay because there's a contract. And then, if we're lucky, we'll find enough information for you to go ahead and get the assets without having to do any interviews of former employees, former colleagues. Although the more expensive stuff really comes at the beginning. The interviews are not as expensive, but we don't like to interview people in the first phase. We like to really do our quiet homework. Because if you interview people, say you interview a former colleague of this person you're looking at, they could tell the person that, hey, I got a call, some investigators looking at you, looking around, and that could maybe get the person alerted to the idea that he needs to hide assets better than he was. So this is the reason we do the public record and internet looking first. Sometimes it's all you need, and the person doesn't even know we're coming.
Phil, this is awesome information, and I appreciate the insight. I know we're just barely scratching the surface, but it certainly gives us a good set of information and tools and things to think about, particularly if people are in a situation where they suspect their spouse is hiding assets. What is the best place for people to learn more about you and your services?
Well, they can go to the website, which is charlesgriffinllc.com. They can look at our blog called The Divorce Asset Hunter, which is devoted just to the very thing we've been talking about today, at divorceasset.hunter.com. They can call us at 212-332-2845. And the book that you mentioned that deals just with fact investigation, it's called The Art of Fact Investigation, and they can pick up a copy at a bookstore or on Amazon, or there's an ebook version of it on Kindle. And I'm happy to chat briefly with anybody who wants a little bit more information about how we work and what it might cost.
Excellent. Well, Philip, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
We're almost done with the episode, but don't leave quite yet. Before you go, I want to make sure that you get the help you deserve. All you have to do is go to divorceandyourmoney.com, and the first thing that you do when you get there is sign up for the email list. You'll see a little box that says get updates and tips, and I will send you exclusive articles, content, and information that you will not find anywhere else, and it gets to go directly to you. The second thing that you do is consider getting one-on-one financial coaching. Look, divorce attorneys are good, But attorneys are not financial experts, and they can make many financial mistakes. I mean, even in the last episode, did they explain these details to you? Did they even bring them up, consider them? And I understand, because finances are really, really complicated. That's why there's over 100 episodes explaining different financial concepts, and sometimes you get to the point where the general information in the podcast, while helpful, you have the question is, how does it apply to me? How does it apply to my situation, my life, and my divorce? And the only way to find out is to go for the one-on-one coaching sessions where I get to help you across the United States, whether you're in California, Texas, Ohio, Illinois, Florida, New York, everywhere in between. We work by phone, email, and in person. All you have to do is click on the coaching tab and fill out a few short questions, and we'll set up an introductory call to see if I can help you. The sooner you get started, the better. Even if you're still preparing financial information or waiting on your spouse to prepare financial information, we can help with that. Or if you're in the middle of negotiating and trying to decide what's right for you. But here's the deal, is once you've signed on the dotted line, the mistakes today are pretty much permanent. And I don't want you to make costly mistakes during divorce. So be sure to consider the coaching, and the sooner you get started, the better off you will be. Finally, on divorceandyourmoney.com, there's just a ton of great resources on there. You can subscribe to the podcast, and if you have iTunes, leave a review, which helps other people discover this free information. I'm your host, Sean Lehman, MBA and Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. Thank you for listening.
Take it up, take it over, take it out of control. Today I'm freeing my soul.